Hey, I'm here with the test results of two more fighter weapons. Today I will go over the performance of the bolt repeater and burst ray in low and high attention mode used by the AI and see how cost effective they are and compare them to the already previously tested beam emitter and blast mortar. The test procedure stayed the same as in the last fighter weapon test, which you find linked in the video description below, together with the explanation of why I did certain tests. In this test I only added a maximum test time of 10 minutes in low attention mode, because here fights can be very long, easily exceeding 50 minutes for certain weapons. Accordingly, I will test how 19 Gladiuses with the different weapons perform against 16 C9M and afterwards reduce the fleet sizes again. So each fleet's total cost matches the cost of a fleet of 19 Gladiuses equipped with the beam emitter MQ1. Before we look at the performance of the two tested weapons, let's have a general look at both weapons. I really liked the bolt repeater when I first started the game, because it's basically a giant space machine gun and the rapid fire feels just very satisfying to me. Its sustained weapon output is close to the burst weapon output, so it can shoot mostly non-stop, which might be actually the weakness of the weapon, cause there are often only short time windows in which weapons can be applied their damage, so bursting a whole weapon load despite the heat development into the target in a short time could be better overall. But we will see how well the bolt repeater MQ1 and MQ2 will perform. The bolt repeater MQ1 is one of the cheaper weapons, while the MQ2 variant is in the mid-cost range. Accordingly, their sustained and burst weapon output are in the lower and mid-range, respectively. Also, the projectile speed of 2400 meters per second is mediocre. If you exclude very specialized weapons for long range, then with a 3 km range, the bolt repeater is one of the fighter weapons with a higher range. Accordingly, I would expect a solid weapon that is not showing overwhelming results. The burst ray shoots short violet rays at its target. When we look at the weapon specifications, it becomes clear fast that this weapon isn't designed as an anti-fighter weapon. When we compare it with the beam emitter, the sustained and burst output is roughly halved, but for this it deals bonus damage to surface elements. So this weapon is clearly not designed as an anti-fighter weapon, although the weapon range of 2.1 km is not the highest. Now let's see how the bolt repeater and burst ray actually perform. In low attention mode, the bolt repeater MQ2 did a solid job. On average, only one Gladius equipped with them per test was lost, and all 16 C9M were destroyed in about 7.5 minutes. Compared to this, the Gladiuses with bolt repeater MQ1 did significantly worse. Here on average 2.3 Gladiuses were lost per test run, and inside a 10-minute test time frame only 4.3 C9Ms were destroyed on average. Even the bolt repeater MQ2 did a solid job, its performance is still below the blast mortar because the killing speed of the 16 C9Ms is around 6 minutes slower, and one more bolt repeater Gladius was lost in this test. As expected, the burst ray MQ1 and MQ2 did worse than the beam emitter. While Gladiuses with MQ1 beam emitters are still able to grind down C9Ms, the Gladiuses with burst rays MQ1 and MQ2 could not destroy a single C9M. During the test, on average, 2.67 burst ray MQ1 Gladiuses were lost and 4 with MQ2s. Since the C9M was destroyed, this explains why theoretically the stronger ship can have worse results, cause both Gladiuses with the MQ1 and MQ2 variant have the same tank, and with their very low DPS they are basically just flying target dummies. When we have a look at how much value was lost during the encounters, we see that the bolt repeater MQ1 did slightly worse than the blast mortar MQ2 from the previous test, with 64,000 credits lost per destroyed C9M against 0 credits lost. In the bolt repeater MQ1 test, on average around 325,000 credits were lost per destroyed C9M. For the burst ray I can only give the total loss, because since these weapons were not able to destroy a single C9M, accordingly I can't divide the lost value by destroyed C9 ships, since dividing by 0 is not defined. Here in the burst ray MQ1 test a total of 1.6 million was lost, and in the MQ2 test a total of 3.3 million credits. In high attention mode I added 2 more tests for the bolt repeaters to the user history. This was necessary to get a clear picture of the performance of both MQ1 and MQ2 variants, because the performance of both weapons was highly fluctuating. The results for the MQ1 bolt repeater range from 14 Gladiuses survived down to all destroyed and up to 13 C9Ms survived. Although the MQ2 variant showed similar results. Here, between 12 and 0 Gladiuses survived and up to 14 C9M. The average loss were 12.6 for the MQ1 variant and 14.2 for the MQ2 variant. The average destroyed C9Ms was 12.2 and 9.8 for the MQ1 and MQ2 variants respectively. So somehow the MQ2 bolt repeater did worse than the MQ1 variant. I would argue likely because each test could go in one or the other direction, and a larger sample size would be needed to say if the MQ2 variant is actually better. But what is clearly is that in high attention mode, the board repeater shows worse results than the beam emitter MQ1 and MQ2 and blast mortar. The burst ray did better in high attention mode than in low attention mode. With the MQ1 variant, the Gladiuses could destroy all xenon Ms in one test. In this test, 4 Gladiuses survived. In the other tests, all Gladiuses were destroyed. On average, in the MQ1 burst ray test, 17.7 Gladiuses were lost and 12.3 xenon Ms were destroyed. In the MQ2 test, in each test, all Gladiuses were lost, and 7.7 xenon Ms were destroyed. The better results for the MQ1 variant can actually be explained because the MQ1 variant does more damage to shields and hulls than the MQ2 variant, but in exchange the MQ2 variant does more damage against surface elements. At least in my test from the 4 tested weapons in high attention mode, the board repeater MQ1 was the most cost efficient weapon with 620,000 credits lost per xenon M destroyed, followed up by the burst ray MQ1 with 875,000 credits lost per destroyed xenon M. In the board repeater MQ2 and the burst ray MQ2 test, 1.5 and 2 million credits were lost per destroyed xenon M respectively. Accordingly, the beam emitter MQ2 is still the best anti-fighter weapon choice for high attention mode, and the blast mortar MQ2 for low attention mode in this test scenario. When we now set an upper cost limit for the fleets sizes are reducing except for the one with board repeaters MQ1. Cause the board repeater MQ1 is slightly cheaper than the beam emitter MQ1. Accordingly, in the second part of the performance test, I used 19 Gladiuses with board repeater MQ1, 11 with the MQ2 variant, 18 with burst ray MQ1, and 13 with the MQ2 variant. In low attention mode, the board repeater MQ1 performed as expected, like in the previous test, since the ship count didn't change. Only one test, significantly more xenon M, were destroyed. Therefore, here the board repeater MQ1 performed slightly better overall. With the reduced ship number, the MQ2 board repeater Gladius fleet couldn't destroy all xenon M inside a 10-minute time frame anymore. But still, even with the reduced fleet size, only 1.67 Gladiuses were lost on average, and 9 xenon Ms were destroyed. With this, the board repeater MQ2 still performs well in low attention mode despite the reduced fleet size. The Gladiuses with burst ray MQ1 and MQ2 couldn't destroy any xenon M in this test although. If they would have, I really would have been surprised because of the smaller fleet sizes in this test. On average, 2 MQ1 burst ray Gladiuses were lost and 3.67 MQ2 ones. Now let's have a look at the lost value per destroyed xenon M. The MQ2 board repeater Gladius fleet was slightly ahead of the MQ1 board repeater fleet with 190,000 versus 220 credits per destroyed xenon M. If I would have limited the test time, all burst ray Gladiuses would have been lost, so only a ship value of 1.2 and 3 millions for the MQ1 and MQ2 variants respectively was lost. In high attention mode, things didn't look too bright, since the Gladius with board repeater MQ2 already struggled in a fleet of 19. It was expected that when their numbers were reduced to 11, they would have no chance. Accordingly, in each test, all 11 MQ2 board repeater Gladius were lost, and on average, they destroyed 3 xenon Ms. So 3.8 million credits were lost per destroyed xenon M. Because the MQ1 board repeater already struggled in the previous test, I decided to do another 3 tests. Here they ended up in a losing streak, where in each try, all 19 Gladiuses and 6 xenon Ms were destroyed on average, resulting in an average loss of 1.9 million credits per destroyed xenon M. The burst ray Gladiuses performed roughly equally to the board repeater MQ1, with around 2 million credits lost per destroyed xenon M. Overall, the results obtained in the test for the burst ray and board repeater MQ1 and MQ2 variants still feel very random, and therefore give only an impression of how well these weapons perform. But the results are still good enough to put them into perspective against the blast mortar and beam emitter. Therefore, from the test we can conclude that the board repeater is the most well-rounded weapon for both modes tested so far in fighter versus fighter combat. While ships equipped with blast mortar only can fight enemy crafts in low attention mode, and with beam emitters equipped in high attention mode, ships equipped with board repeaters can fight in both modes. In low attention, it must still be mentioned that Gladiuses with board repeaters MQ2 in this test scenario with 7.5 minutes until all xenon Ms were destroyed are way slower than the Gladiuses with blast mortars MQ2 with close to only 2 minutes. In high attention mode, in the tested scenario, it is luck dependent if the Gladiuses with board repeater MQ1 or MQ2 win or lose. while ships with one or the other beam emitter variant can win here reliably. The burst ray turned out to be not a valuable choice since it is weaker than a beam emitter because it is designed to shoot surface elements and has accordingly less damage output. When we look at a test where the fleet cost was fixed and accordingly the ships in the fleet differ, we see that investing in the Bolt Repeater MK2 in high attention mode is a waste of money. Although the 3 extra tests with the MK1 variant, despite the equal number of ships, showed that the weapon is not money efficient. Both burst ray variants showed roughly equal results to the Bolt Repeater MK1. Accordingly, none of the tested weapon convinced in this test. In low attention mode, Gladiuses with either one Bolt Repeater variant showed okay results, with only around 200,000 credits lost per destroyed C9M. Why only okay results? Because they can destroy all 16 targets in a 10-minute time frame. Although in this test, the burst ray was completely inefficient. So, if using Bolt Repeaters, the most important point in my opinion is to vastly outnumber the enemy fleet to avoid that fights bouncing either to one or the other side, with the risk of losing the battle. Overall, including the test results from my last video, the results show that a mixed fleet with blast mortars and beam emitters, like shown in my last video, is so far the most efficient choice to cover both modes in one fleet in fighter vs fighter combat. If you like to play fights in high tension mode, it can be a valid choice to switch the blast mortar against Bolt Repeaters, so the fights aren't over before you can see them and report to the fleet, while having still ships with beam emitters in the fleet, stabilizing the fleet performance in high tension mode. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss my next test results. That was it from my side for today, and I see you next time. Have a nice day.